Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. Ladies and gentlemen, as you heard, I'm dealing with the peace research, and my assignment is to say a little what can we contribute at this very serious time and serious movement. And the first thing I think we can contribute is a bit of statistics. So, our conflict data program just has reported that the number of wars last year, 2014, were 10. And that is the highest number in this century. It also points to very limited achievements in making peace to end these wars. We find fewer peace agreements than in many years. And it's alarming because we also know that peace agreements have a higher quality today than before, and that war endings with peace agreements are more likely to remain at peace than others, including the victories that most parties search for. Because victory is always what the parties want. But we know that victory is not the typical outcome of a war. It is much more common that it ends in a stalemate or in a ceasefire, or, as I said, a peace agreement. And it's not unusual to people to be skeptical about peace agreements. They say it's just another paper. But the record defies such negativism. The 200 peace agreements concluded since the end of the Cold War have been instrumental in ending about 40 different conflicts. So, after all, most conflicts do end in some way or the other. During the past 25 years, there have been close to 150 smaller or bigger wars, and 30 of them were going on last year, 10 of which were wars, as I said. That means, if you think about it, that 120 have actually ended. We have reasons to believe that also the current ones can be terminated. So if you ask me, as a scholar of peace research, to think about this is one way we can put ourselves, give a picture of the predicament we have. 10 wars are, of course, 10 too many, but it is still less than the 15 we saw in 1990. Efforts to deal with conflicts have paid off, even if they seldom reach the headlines. So this is one way in which I think we can contribute to peace. And this is also one reason why I think that the Inter-Peace and the Stockholm Peace talks are at the right moment. It's today we need to think about peace more than ever. But I think we scholars can also be useful in another way. And as the moderator just mentioned, mediation is one of those. And there are several people here who are very experienced in mediation. If you look at the 200 peace agreements I mentioned, most of them have actually involved a third party, somebody mediating. So I will comment very quickly on 3 phases or 3 movements in the mediation. It is when you enter it, when you engage the parties, and how you exit it. And I will do that building on my personal experience, as you heard. First, about how you enter into a mediation. In our research, we have identified more than 40 Nordic mediators since the time of Count Bernadotte in 1948. And many, when you ask them, report that the mediation started with a telephone conversation. This is also what happened to me 25 years ago, almost exactly, in 1990, with a call from a university center on the faraway island of Bougainville, Papua New Guinea. The call went very quickly like this. Is this Professor Wallensteen? Yes. We have read your article. Oh, I was so surprised that I even forgot to ask which one. And the final question, can you come? Well, thanks to this conflict data program, I know what conflict this was all about. The rebel movement wanted the island of Bougainville to become independent. The government, of course, did not want to see its country divided. The origin of this was an environmental destruction created by an internationally operated copper mine. At the time of the call, the conflict was rapidly escalating with increasing violence. The local university center had created a think tank which had contacts with the opposing sides, the government in the capital and the rebel leaders in the jungles on the island. They all agreed on the need for new thinking. Such a shared understanding is, of course, of utmost importance. Only very big powers can, so to say, invite themselves to become mediators. Mostly the parties are the ones that invite or accept a mediator. This makes sense, of course. It is their conflict, and they need to have a key role in the settlement. And then not just the leaders, the population need to be involved. So I accepted and arrived in Papua New Guinea with a mandate to talk to both sides and look for common ground. And this leads me then to the second component in mediation, and that is engaging the parties. Much mediation takes place as shuttle diplomacy. Knowing how difficult it can be to get the parties to the same table, my involvement resulted in such a traveling between the parties, going from one to the other. They refused to meet. The rebel leaders were suspicious. There was no telephone communication. Mobile phones had been invented, but they were not trusted. Hence, the third parties, that's me and the University Center team, were the only official link between the government and the rebels. And we were traveling through the roadblocks and to the rebel camps, which continuously was changing their venue. This was shuttle diplomacy. It was improved by a tape recorder. That was our invention. We could record the statements of one side and actually travel with it to the other side, play it, they could listen, and they could give a response, and we could go back with the tape recorder. This is how our negotiations were conducted in those days. At times, parties may agree to meet. They didn't in this case, but I was involved in another effort by the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs in about the same time, in 1990. And the idea was to establish a direct link between the parties in the conflict on the Middle East, the PLO and the Israelis. I was asked to chair the encounter. Israel had a law against meeting representatives of a terrorist organization, and PLO was identified as such at that time. Legal experts concluded that this law meant that an Israeli could not be seated next to a PLO member and could not talk directly to a PLO member. But going to academic conferences was acceptable, and thus even sitting in the same room. With that information, we could call together a meeting of Israelis and Palestinians in June 1990, under the auspices of Uppsala University, in a secret location here in Sweden, and in the form of an academic seminar with presentations of academic research. And that made it possible to create a forum where the participants could get to know each other and found ways to communicate. The meeting demonstrated to the two sides that there were well-informed, well-argued and responsible people on the other side. And the seminar resulted in a number of ideas on how to move forward. It was the beginning of contacts. Certainly, politics intervene in many things. In this case, Swedish elections in September 1991, a change of government, and the Swedish file on these Israeli-Palestinian contacts were handed over to the Norwegians. And the Oslo Channel, that you just heard, made global headlines in August 1993, less than 2 years later. But it should be noted that this channel also began as an academic seminar, and the participants were actually formally part of a research project on the living conditions on the West Bank. The channel resulted, as we all know, in a peace agreement, and the process was referred to Oslo for short. With this, I would like to say that meetings of parties can be more fruitful than shuttle diplomacy, but it requires this kind of confidence building. The university setting serves well as a place for mutual dialogue and generation of ideas. In other words, brainstorming. It is a format, I think, to explore further. Finally, exiting. All third-party activity has to end. The conflict, as I said, belongs to the parties and their peoples, and the solution has to be theirs. They are the ones to live with the outcome and to take responsibility for its implementation. So the mediator will leave at a certain moment in time. In my case, in Papua New Guinea, the commitment was expected to be short, and it was. But it led to a signed ceasefire agreement that also was implemented. When working on this, I could borrow ideas from existing peace agreements, the many that I mentioned. I was aware of similar situations, but they were unknown to the parties themselves. I could offer them concrete examples, such as the Åland Islands, which are at the same time self-governing and part of a larger state, Finland. This was valuable to both sides in the Bougainville conflict. I also could recommend diplomatic techniques used when ending the war in Nicaragua around the same time. Lessons elsewhere in the world can help parties in a particular conflict. It is a matter of learning from practical experiences. Many components in conflicts are actually the same. As for my exit then from the Papua New Guinea situation, it had a logical end. There was a ceasefire in place. At that moment, the atmosphere on the island changed. Suddenly, youngsters were out playing football on the beaches. Soldiers in the roadblocks were smiling, waving, and talking happily about going home. When war ends, people are eager to go back to the normality that existed before, even though much has changed. There was a chance for peace at that time, and this is, of course, what we want to create constantly. So during this presentation, I have referred to the Uppsala Conflict Data Program. It's not a commercial product. It's actually a freely available resource on the internet from Uppsala University, and you can all download it to your smartphone without any costs. But it gives some information for how conflicts develop and solutions that can be developed as well. It is a tool for our quest for peace. And indeed, peace is important. It is the most reasonable way of life. We need to emphasize this over and over again, and that makes the Stockholm Peace Talks and its approach very important. But let us remember, it's not just a matter of talk, there is also a need for informed action. Thank you for your attention.